which is like a really popular area. And I drive by it sometimes. And I sold that thing for $85,500.
If you're investing.
Investors.
The podcast for all things real estate investing. So, welcome back to another episode of Investor One on One. Today's guest is a systems driven entrepreneur who's helped scale most of the successful real estate investment companies in the country. He's the founder and CEO of Let's Grow COO, a company that places fractional COOs and sales leaders into real estate investing businesses that are ready to streamline operations and scale responsibly. He's also the managing partner of Moontower Property Solvers, a nationwide investment firm that buys, sells, and leases residential, commercial, multifamily, and mobile home park assets. Since 2010, he's been involved in over 2,000 real estate transactions as a realtor, investor, and operator. Along the way, he's trained more than 500 investors in novations, helped build the original Brewer Method course, and continues to place and train high-performing acquisition reps through his newest venture, acquisitionreps.com. His mission is to help entrepreneurs stop hustling in chaos and start scaling with clarity. So please welcome to the show, Matt Viebrock.
Thank you for having me, or I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us, man. So let's just start, with your story. Take us back on how you got started into real estate and how that journey led you to where you are today.
Yeah, so long story. Initially when I was in high school, I wanted to be, actually from the time I was like 4 years old, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. So I actually, my entire life, all the way out leading up to college, was preparing me to do that. And so I actually ended up getting two full ride scholarships, one to the Air Force, one to the Navy, and I chose the Air Force path. Went through ROTC at Texas A&M University for my first year, and then quickly realized that this is not the place I want to be. I found out I actually had a bit of a problem with authority. So being in the military was probably not the best idea. So real estate was always my backup. So I read Rich Dad Poor Dad for the first time when I was 16. And from there, I was like, I know I want to do something in real estate, whether it be, owning them or whatever. I always just thought I was going to buy like, 10 properties and retire, and that was it. But, how an entrepreneur starts their journey is rarely how they actually finish it, right? So I graduated from Texas A&M University, and then I went to work briefly in the car industry. That was just so I could be close to my grandfather, who was about to pass away. And then right after all that was done, I went to work for New Western Acquisitions as a disposition manager for them, and I was one of their top sales reps within 7 months. So, but the problem was I was driving from North Austin to downtown San Antonio 6 days a week, which is about a 92-mile trip round trip. I'm sorry, one way doing that, and then I would come back late at night. So, and I was living with my girlfriend, who's now my wife. I had a gas guzzler of a car. So driving around San Antonio all day and then also driving that far, I spent most of my commissions just on gas. Even though I was a top salesman, I was like, okay, this isn't going to work for me. So then I went and worked for a company called Lifestyles Unlimited, and I was their only realtor for the Austin area for a couple of years. And so all I was tasked with doing was basically finding underwriting deals, for the members of Lifestyles and, Unlimited. And their whole thing was buy 10 properties and then they call it chunking up into multifamily, right? So, and then doing some sort of like 1031 or something like that into multifamily. But in order to, get those deals, their members had to actually go buy those single family properties first. And so that's where I stepped in. I helped them. And I kick myself now because I still remember I drive by, there's this one house in Round Rock, Texas, which is like a really popular area. And I drive by it sometimes. And I sold that thing for $85,500. And now that property's worth every bit of probably 400. And I'm just
Wow.
like, I wish I would have bought that one myself, right? So, but I think that's every real estate entrepreneur's, one regret is they didn't buy more properties and hold on to them for longer. But yeah, I mean, from there, I worked at a big real estate team, like a realtor team. That was also doing a lot of investing stuff as well here in Austin called the Heil Group. And they were doing 300 transactions a year, and I did transaction coordination for them, built out their entire operations kind of system and everything like that. And at the end of it, my boss, Tim Heil, the owner, came to me and was like, man, you did such a great job, but I can't afford to pay you anymore. He's like, why don't you go start your own TC company? I'll send people your way. And so that's what I did. And I ran a transaction coordination company for 8 years. I had a couple different TCs that were working under me, and we did, me personally, I've worked on over 2,000 transactions, like you mentioned in the intro, as an investor, a realtor, a TC, as an operations specialist. So I've seen pretty much every single side of the business when it comes to single family for sure. So, and then my story takes a turn, and then like as I was doing all this, I was also still wholesaling and everything at the same time. And then I find Eric Brewer and Steve Trang's course about novations. And so with that, I was like, I had a partner at the time. I was like, dude, we should sign up for this novation training. It's going to be like the next big thing. And we did that, and we started having some really good success with it. And then I was in another mastermind at the time, and other people were coming to me and asking, "Hey, can you teach me how to do that?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever. I mean, pay me 5 grand. I'll teach you how to do it. We'll do 3 deals together, and I do 70-30 on the first one, then 60-40, then 50-50, and I give you your 5K back at the end of it." And people were blown away. It was working really well. We're doing that. And so then I went to Eric and I was like, dude, have you actually thought about turning this into an actual course? And, if you ever read the book, Who Not How. So Eric was like, damn, I've been thinking about building a course for the last 10 years on how to do these. He's like, I don't want to do it myself. Could you just do it for me? And so that's how we ended up partnering up to create the Brewer Method Novations course, the first iteration of it. And I did that for about 3 years with them and was the COO of that company for 3 years and taught 500 plus investors how to do novations and scale their business and stuff. But honestly, or like the one thing that kept coming up more than anything during so that whole mastermind was supposed to be about nothing but novations. But nobody was asking about novations on our weekly calls. It was always something around sales process issues or operations issues or people issues. And it's like, how do I fix these different things? And so I realized I was like, man, there's a need here. It seems like nobody's really kind of filling. It's like, how do we help people scale their businesses responsibly, right? Because I was also seeing so many people who were just like going into massive amounts of debt to pay for leads and things like that. And it's like, okay, this is not how you scale. And that's when I sold my shares in that company back to Eric, middle of 2023. And I've been basically doing Let's Grow COO ever since then, just consulting mostly companies are doing 1 million plus in annual revenue currently with wholesaling innovations, all that kind of stuff. But we're now at the point where it's like, how do we get really, really good trained sales reps into companies that we've pre-vetted? So that's really what we're focused on now.
That's amazing, man. Like amazing story, and I have a lot of questions following up on all
Yeah.
that. Let's start off with, what are the biggest operational bottlenecks that are holding real estate investing companies from scaling past 500,000 to $1 million a year?
Hmm. A couple. One is they're not really. Have you ever read the book Checklist Manifesto or heard of it before? No. Okay, it's a really good book, but basically, the owner is most of the times just the bottleneck, right? Because they can't get everything I call it tribal knowledge. They can't get that out of their head and put it onto paper. And so that's one of the first things we focus on is like, how do we get all that knowledge that's out of your head and how you want things done mapped out in such a way that, we can then plug other people in, right? So I'd say really the number one thing is just the owners being in their own heads and getting in their own way. And that's why one of the first things we always do when we work somebody is we have them do a time study, right? And they hate me for it most of the time because it sucks. It's no fun. But it really is one of the most eye-opening things. And I'll give you an example of how this works. I'm working with a company right now. We're just starting to work with them. Had them doing their time study. They were already doing about 1 million a year in annual revenue. But what we came to find was that the owner was working on 10 and $30 an hour tasks that somebody else could have been doing. And once we created a delegation list and how do we get all that crap off of his plate and we give that to somebody else, his amount of time in the business per week went down by, I think, 22 hours or down to 22 hours per week. But his dollar per hour value went up by $300 per hour just by focusing on the most important things, right? So that's one. Another big one is analysis paralysis, right? So, and I see people thinking about like, well, if I do this just a certain way, like they want everything to be perfect. And it's like, it's never going to be perfect, right? But done is the new perfect, is what I always tell people. So I'd say those are probably some of the top two that I can think of. Maybe a third. A third is hiring the wrong people and not taking them through a process, right? So what I mean by that is you should hire slow and fire fast, always, right? So I've been told that our hiring process is better than some Fortune 500 companies with some of the clients that worked in those kind of companies before. But we're very, very intentional about like, okay, what is the exact profile of the person we're looking for this one job? And how do we go and then make sure we find that right person and then train them up correctly So that way they're actually going to have the success that you're looking for. Because turnover is like one of the number one killers of businesses, right? It's so expensive, especially for sales positions that like you can literally it'll cost you, five figures, maybe on the depending on how big your operation is, low six figures, in order if you have the wrong hire, right? So bottle owners being the bottleneck, analysis paralysis, and hiring wrong are those top three, I'd say.
That's great advice, man. Thanks for sharing. And, as someone that was a COO and works with so many COOs on day to day, can you break down what an effective COO actually does day to day inside a real estate investing company?
Yeah, so the COO, so the CEO typically is, the visionary in most cases, I would say. They are the ones who are going to be driving the organization, with the strategy and the plan of like how are we going to move forward. And I always tell people that a CEO's job is really three things. And so it comes down to making sure you have the right people on the bus, right? Watching the numbers like a hawk and being the chief energizing officer or the culture driver, right? So that's really what the best CEOs are focused on is those three things. Everything else should be delegated to a COO unless the CEO is more operationally minded, then they can take on some of that kind of stuff. But then the COO has to be that counterbalance, right? So there's a book by Cameron Herold called Second in Command. I highly, highly recommend anybody who's looking to get a COO to read that first to make sure you understand kind of what a COO does. But effectively, the COO is going to be the driver of revenue more than anything else, right? And so that person should be making sure that basically everybody, if you think about like the old Viking ships, it's like think about everybody on the team being on one of those Viking ships and they're all rowing in the same direction. And the COO is the guy at the front of the ship who's saying, row, like, and just getting everybody to do it in the same direction, right? So that's ultimately what it does. Now, if you want to break down like what they do day to day in the business, a lot of it comes down to people management, strategy management, making sure that we're all, staying aligned, actually watching the numbers like a hawk to make sure, hey, are we hitting the KPIs of everything that needs to get done? And then also making sure that they're the ones who are responsible for actually doing the hiring, right? And making sure that they're hiring those right people. So the CEO gives the vision, says, here's what I want to happen. COO, you go do it, right? That's basically what it comes down to.
For sure. And as you said in the beginning, you're that sales and operations guy in every successful business. That's like the core things they need. It's also marketing what we do. But, I also went to lots of conferences and different masterminds, and that's like the biggest problems they're having. So
Yeah.
shifting into sales, you've trained and placed hundreds of acquisition reps.
hmm
What separates a top performer from an average one?
Conflict resolution, I'd say, is probably one of the biggest ones. And so, funny enough, some of the best acquisition reps I've ever worked with were former first responders and military NCOs, so non-commissioned officers. Not officers, like that was the path I was going to take when I was going in the military. I'm not talking about those guys. They have their place, right? But NCOs, especially, and police officers, I found they make some of the best reps because they are dealing with a lot of the same types of seller. A cop pulls somebody over and they're drunk, whatever, and they have to basically deal with whatever is going on with that particular situation and de-escalate that in order to convince that person, hey, we need to figure out how to make this better, right? In some way, form, or fashion, right? So that is a skill that I think is really hard to teach, but if you have that, man, you could be an awesome acquisition rep. That's one. The other is, let's see, just the right mindset, grit. You have to have grit in order to stay with this. Probably one of the first things we do when we bring on a new acquisition rep is we put them on the dialer with a brand new niche cold call list, and for the first 2 weeks, they're just pounding the phone. And I want to see how many hours of talk time do they have, how much actual time on the dialer, how many, appointments did they set for another acquisition rep, or if they felt like they could, how many offers did they make, right? But the goal is just like if they can make it for past the first 2 weeks of just dialing like crazy, and then we move them into the lead management seat, and they stay there until they've closed at least 5 deals from follow-up, then and from cold call and SMS leads. Only then do they get to graduate, move on to actually taking inbound leads from guys like you at motivated sellers and all that kind of stuff. So that's where, it's crucial to make sure somebody has grit. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to stay in this business very long. So I'm trying to think of some other things too. I think right behavioral profile is another big one too. Grit, I will say though, over Trump's personality style all day long, because I've seen people who were complete opposite of like a captain or a maverick on the predictive index, who then just goes out and crushes it because they're forcing themselves to do the job. I think having that alignment of somebody who has the right behavioral profile with that grit is just like a powerhouse, person to kind of be bringing on your team.
For sure. And let's say they have that exact profile. How do you train brand new reps to close deals, and what does that onboarding process look like?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, like I said, first 2 weeks, they're immediately getting into training, right? The sales training that we do. We do four weekly calls for an hour at a time. And then we train the owners of those companies that we work with that they should be meeting, like doing sales training every single morning for at least 30 minutes a day, minimum, right? Whether that be in the morning or outside of best call times, which is usually 8 to 10 and between 4 and 7 every day. Tuesday through Saturday is what we found, because Mondays and Sundays, just for some reason, we can't, it's not nearly as good as, those days. But we get them in, immediately start having them getting on the dialer, and after we've given them the script that we're using, right? And so we have a very set, just, and it's actually a job form that I created that literally is kind of like a paint by numbers, if you will. It's like if the seller says this, you choose that, it'll tell you exactly what to say next. So that way they kind of get used to the flow and the feel of how those conversations are going to go. But that's where the conflict resolution, being able to think quickly on your feet, will translate over, because if like somebody gets you off script, you have to learn how to like get them back on, right? Because the seller doesn't know your script, only you do, right? So it's like you have to be the one in control of that conversation. So we do four weekly sales training calls. Mondays we always do a call review of one of the acquisition reps discovery calls and actual offer calls, and then we break that down, we score it, all that kind of stuff. Wednesdays we do actual one-on-one group coaching, basically with the REI Sales Academy. Right now is going to who we're partnered up with. We're also going to be working with Steve Trang's Disruptors here pretty soon as well. And then that's where they're going to go through the actual course material, like studying how the sales process works, or the psychology of the sales process, all that kind of stuff, how to make offers. And then on Thursdays, we do like an open Q&A. It's kind of like a professor's office hours kind of thing. It's like bring whatever questions, issues you have that as they come up. And then Fridays we always do role playing, right? And there's a bit of role playing that's always throughout all of our trainings. But like that's how we currently do it. And then, like I said, every day the owner of the company that's working should be doing like a live sales training with their people and going through like the hot sheet, right? Everybody should have a hot sheet of like, here's the top 10 leads that we've got that we think we need to like kick them off the fence on one way or the other within the next 2 weeks to get them to sign a contract, right? And then we role play what's going on with that lead. How can we like try and convert them? And if for some reason we can't, then getting like the owner or a sales manager on the phone to do a what we call a survey call, right? So just call the seller and be like, hey, it sounds like Or was taking great care of you and everything like that. It sounds like we're close to making a deal happen. But normally when we get to this point, there's one of three things that's going to slow us down. It's either other people, you didn't like the process, or you didn't like the price. So which one of those three, was there something else that's holding you back from selling the property? Right. So that we call this a survey call. So we can kind of knock them off the fence. So first 2 weeks, always on the dialer and getting used to the CRM, the phone system, the script, going through all the training within the first 2 weeks. And then like I said, the rest of the time they're in that lead manager seat doing nothing but follow-up calls and talking to cold call leads, right, that are coming in. And they have to sit in that seat until they've closed 5 deals from follow-up. And we typically are doing this over a 90-day span during their first, 90-day probationary period. And if they can't make it past that and close 5 deals within, and when I say close 5 deals, like lock up 5 contracts within that first 90 days, they're probably like there's a 95% chance or better that they're not going to be able to make it past that. So we usually end up letting them go after the first 3 months. But I've had people who come in, they'll get 6 contracts in the first, 3 weeks, right? And then immediately they're on to, once they've gone through a little bit more hand-holding training, then it's like, okay, now let me actually be on the calls and listen with you while you're talking with these sellers, and like whisper in your ear with, some of these different phone systems can do that, like what to kind of say next. But then those people graduate and move on, and they're immediately starting to take in new leads and closing deals, right? And then we're just kind of refining the process with them as they start to go.
That's an amazing breakdown. So You spoke a little about how the owners and founders should be a big part of this. A lot of founders struggle to let go of sales. What advice would you give them when handing off conversations for the first time?
Oh man, that's such a good one. If you are the best salesperson on your team right now, you should stay in sales, right? Is what I say. Transition though should look like the owner is still the one taking the inbound leads, like the more expensive stuff. So PPL, PPC, SEO, direct mail, all that kind of stuff, and closing those leads themselves, at least until the rep has actually gone through that kind of a training process, and then it's a um, me, we, you, right, is the training process that we follow. So you watch me do it first, right? Then we do it together, and then you do it, and I'm just watching you, right? So they're watching me close all these, inbound leads first, listening to my calls as well as study those, and then we're doing it together. So I think just having the mentality that the understanding that this is not going to be a quick fix. I get so many owners that I talk to who are like, man, I need a sales rep in here yesterday. Like this is not working. I got to get somebody in. Here's the deal. One, you have to be, if you want an A player, like a rock star on your team, you have to be a rock star owner, right? So which means you have to have all of your systems dialed in. You've got to have the other right people on the team, for marketing, transaction coordination, dispo. You don't have that kind of stuff lined out. You have no business bringing on a sales rep. You just don't, right? Because what's going to happen is A players don't want to work for B and C owners, right? So you have to level up your game and have all that stuff kind of ready to go first. And then understanding that if you want A player talent, it's going to take a while to find them, right? It's kind of like trying to find a needle in a haystack in a lot of cases. When I say like A player, I'm not talking about, so with that is it's not going to it's going to take a while, right? So you have to level up your game. And so during the 90 days or so that while we're trying to actually go out there and source candidates and try to find those people for you to interview, that's where we also are working with you to get all those systems set up. So that way you are ready to go to bring on somebody, right? The other thing too is if you're not ready, willing, and able to spend, I would say on the low end, 5 grand a month per sales rep, per like in order to generate leads, you shouldn't be bringing on somebody at that point. I really say 10. 10 is like a good number that I find if you just got, 10 grand a month getting spent on marketing, that's usually good enough for one sales rep. So anything less than that, it's going to be kind of sketchy. Um, let's see, the other part of that too. So is just having the mentality and being open to let go of some of the other things on your plate, right? So the delegation aspect of it, which is really hard for a lot of people. So those are probably, I'd say, my top three things right there.
Amazing. Following up on that, let's talk a little bit more about innovations and exit strategies. So you said you helped build Eric Brewer's original novation course. How do you see innovations fitting in today's market?
I think honestly, if you're not doing novations, you're going to get way left behind, right? Massively. So what I'm seeing is that most of my clients that are doing upwards of 60 to 75% of their deals that they do now are novations, and the rest is wholesaling, fix and flip, rentals, whatever it might be. It has become the go-to way of doing deals, right? And I'm not saying that because I have any vested interest in the Brewer method or anything like that anymore. I don't. It's just I believe in that process so much that, and not only that, but I think it gives the seller a much better experience than just the traditional wholesaling route in a lot of cases. But novations is not for everybody, right? So it's really for those types of people who, are ready and willing and able to give us reasonable time and access to the property, in order to take it to the open market, as well as to our private list of buyers that we have, right? However, that being said, there's a lot of, I think there's something like 27 states right now that either have legislation on the books to outlaw wholesaling or severely restrict it. And a lot of those states are lumping in novations as well, right? With that, as like considering it as wholesaling. South Carolina is one of those, right? I think it's just a perfect example of that. So I think if you're going to do novations, wholesaling, whatever, just make sure that you actually understand the laws in the different markets that you're working in. And so that way, you can know, am I can I do this legally or not, right? Because you don't want to don't want to get in trouble with the real estate commission or anybody else for that matter. So hopefully that answered your question. But What did that answer your question, or was there something else?
No, yeah, and for these people who are doing wholesales and flips, and you said novation is not for anyone or for
Hmm.
everybody, what systems need to be in place before they can successfully bolt on novations?
Gosh, a really, really good transaction coordinator, right? So, and that's the other thing too, is I think I see a lot of times people want to go nationwide with their marketing as well. And I think that has its place if you are a company that has an amazing transaction coordination process, an amazing marketing department, an amazing disposition department as well. If you don't have those things in place, you really don't have any business going nationwide, as far as I'm concerned. What I would do is I would start off in your local market or pick a market where you can build an amazing team of having a really good real estate attorney there, an amazing title company, get a good transaction coordinator, and get a good inspector and somebody who could be boots on the ground to go take pictures, put out lock boxes, signs, and all that kind of stuff, right? And then the key with any sort of innovations is having a realtor who actually understands what the innovation process is and is willing to let you guide that conversation and be the quarterback of the deal. Otherwise, if you don't have a realtor who can do that and a title company or a closing attorney who doesn't understand how novations work, you're already going to be dead in the water from the very beginning. So I would say pick whatever market you're going to go into. Make sure you build that team first, because that's going to be crucial if you're going to do novations.
For sure, great advice, man. Let's go more into systems and SOPs. What's your approach to creating SOPs that actually get followed and not just sit in a folder collecting dust?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So the first thing, honestly, people get kind of scared about SOPs, and it's really actually much simpler than people, make it out to be. So the only tool really that you need for SOPs is just Loom, Loom.com, right? And I don't have like any sort of affiliation with them or anything like that. We just use it every single day. And what we do is an SOP should be 8 to 10 steps of a process, right? So there's two different parts. You have process mapping, right, which is taking like your entire department for acquisitions, let's say, it's like mapping out how your sales process, from getting a lead to when it actually closes, that's a process, right? Then each little step inside of that process map is a standard operating procedure, an SOP, right? So each one of those will usually have about 8 to 10 steps as you're doing it. Now, not everything needs to be SOP'd out, right? Let's just be clear on that. So a lot of people think, oh, I got to have an SOP for every single thing in my business. No, you don't. You really don't. Because if you bring on the right people, then the right people are usually going to be smart enough to kind of figure out how certain things need to go if there's a question, right? These are just the big things of like, here's how we do it, right, in order to move the needle more than anything else. So get a Loom account, and anytime you find yourself doing something more than once, hit the little record button on Loom and make sure you have the little transcript feature going as well. And Loom's AI actually is really good for actually capturing, putting everything kind of already into an SOP kind of a document. But then what you do is you record yourself doing it. You say, here's the business context. Here's why we're doing this. Here's what I expect the certain outcome to look like once it's done. Here's what success looks like at the end of this SOP. And then you literally are walking through step by step on your screen and pointing out every single thing that has to go through it. And you're saying, step one, do this. Step two, do this. And the AI is going to pick all that up, right? Because then what I do is I have a prompt that we just give to Chat GPT and say, turn this video and this transcript into an SOP document. And you can also run it through scribe.com as well. It'll pull out all the screenshots from the video that you did, right? Which is pretty cool. And so then you can actually, then that becomes your SOP, right? And then we have a free template that we use. People use things like Trainual and Notion and things like that, those paid tools. Honestly, for us, we found it's just as simple as creating a company wiki on Google Pages. And so we have a free template that we use where people can literally create their entire company SOP playbook online, and you just stick it into each one of those different departments where it needs to go. It's very simple. So people make it way more complicated than it needs to be. And I'm happy to give you what that prompt looks like and how we do it and all that kind of stuff too.
Sure, those are some amazing tools. And, after hearing our conversation today, can you kind of give us, an A to Z case study of a client you're working with now, some numbers, some struggles that they're having, so we can, go more into. into life?
Yeah. Gosh, oh my gosh, I'm trying to think of one in particular. Yeah, so we have one of my first clients actually that we for the fractional COO side of it. So when he came to us, he's out in New York on Long Island, which is a incredibly competitive market up there. So which things are way different in New York than they are in most of the country. So we already kind of dealing with some headwinds from that as well. But he had two players in his market as well who were just absolutely crushing everybody else. And so when he came to us, he was like negative $250,000 in net profit from the year before. So, like, imagine that. Like, you're doing all this work and you're literally paying $250,000 to keep your business afloat just to keep going, right? Like, most people can't stomach that. Um, Mostly doing fix and flips, right? And then, so what we started doing with him was like, okay, this is something else too. You have to define, there's a million different ways to skin the real estate cat, right? But you have to define what is your investor profile, like what do you want to be as an investor? Do you want to be a fix and flipper? Do you want to do mostly wholesaling, mostly novations? Everybody talks about having all these different strategies, and that's what this guy was doing. He was trying to kind of marry them all up at the same time, right? And it was just like, dude, you're a fix and flipper. Like you do an amazing job as a flipper. You don't need to go create this huge company where, you have wholesaling and novations and all these different things and try to marry it all up. It's a mess, right? Um, and so we got very intentional with him about it, saying, okay, you're a fix and flipper. Now let's document your process and what all that needs to look like, right? And then once that is back up and running to the point where it needs to be, profitable, with a pretty hefty profit margin built in, then you can start to bring on additional people. And then we can create a separate business like you wanted to do for wholesaling, right? And so now we've done that. His fix and flipping business is finally doing well. He's probably going to make, $500,000 this year just from, everything that we kind of taught him how to do after we turn it around. And then the wholesaling side of it becomes its own separate business, right? Now his wholesaling business is feeding his fix and flip business as well, which is really nice too. So I think a big piece of advice on that is like, don't think you have to do all at once. I would just pick one strategy, go really deep on it, and get really good at it before you move on to the next one, right? So, and this particular guy now, he's got a full acquisition team dispo. He's got runners who go out, and put out the signs and lock boxes and stuff, but a team of door knockers who goes out in the neighborhoods that he wants to buy in and stuff like that. And he just gets to cherry pick the best deals for himself for the fix and flip stuff, and then he wholesales off the rest, which is nice. So, and then that company this year will do upwards of probably a million or so, and just on the wholesaling side. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know like how deep you want to go into the details with it, but like he's one of our success stories. So,
No, that's
it's,
that's awesome. And I
yeah,
got some really good tips and advice out of that. And it
yeah.
follows up to my next question. You brought up some books along the way that helped you in your journey from,
Hmm.
pivoting to different things and getting you to where you are today. But if you had to choose one tip or a quote or one of the books or a piece of advice that you'd recommend to every real estate investor listening right now, what would it be?
That's a really good one. I've got like 100 books, just my Audible so I'm a big Audible guy. And I'm trying to look here at all these different books I've got. Um, I think one of my favorite books that I've read recently that I think would has is like the most tactical, like practical advice you can do is once you get to the point, a lot of people think that they really need a salesperson first, right? And I think that's actually a big mistake. Because usually the owner is the best one at selling more than anybody else, right? So in that case, I would say get as much off of your plate right now in order to focus on doing more sales and more revenue generation and then create a delegation list using we call it a freedom focus or time study, right? Which I'm going to give that to you as well as one of the gifts that you can give to your audience. And it's got video instructions and stuff like that on how to do it. But once you go through the process of doing a time study, I recommend 14 days, but you could do it even for 5 days, and that's plenty. You're going to start to see a bunch of stuff that you need to get off your plate. Create a delegation list from that. And then that delegation list then becomes a job posting that you can go out and make find an executive assistant essentially. An EA is really your full force multiplier, right? So that's why I think the number one book I've been recommending more than anything else lately is The Founder and the Force Multiplier by Adam Hergenrother and his previous assistant, Hallie Warner is her name. So it's a phenomenal book. It's written by a guy who's in real estate as well. I think if you follow the principles that are in that alone, and you start off with, if you're doing less than $300,000 a year in annual revenue, then hiring a VA at $10 an hour, who's like a really high level one, getting them first to handle a lot of the crap that's on your plate that's less than $30 an hour, or I'm sorry, less than $100 an hour tasks. When you see it on my Freedom Focuser, you'll see what I'm talking about. And then you focus on sales, and then only once you have all those different pieces in place, transaction coordination, marketing, dispose down, all that kind of stuff, then you bring on the sales rep, right? Because ultimately, if you're the best one at selling, that's the last thing you should hand off is sales, to be honest with you. So start off with an EA, read The Founder and the Force Multiplier, and I think you're going to be in great shape.
Awesome. And to follow up and conclude this, what's next for Let's Grow COO, acquisitionreps.com, as you continue helping more real estate investing companies scale? And what's
Yeah.
next for you on a personal level?
Yeah. So for me, well, I guess for on the Let's Grow COO side of it, we're 100% dialed in on just really acquisitionreps.com is the feeder program for people to become a client for Let's Grow COO.com, right? So with that, we are 100% focused on helping people who want to get into real estate learn how to become an acquisition agent, and we actually will pay you to go through our training, and we will give you leads, pre-qualified leads to handle, and then you're going to close those 5 deals. You're going to get your top tier closer certification, and then we're going to place you with one of those companies that we've already pre-vetted. And like we said, make sure they have TC, Dispo, marketing, all those other things kind of built in place, already ready to go. And then once you've graduated from our program, then we place you with those clients, right? So who are doing that, and then you can go on and just focus on doing nothing but the closing sellers piece, right? And then let everybody else on the team do what they do best. So, and then from there, that allows us to work with the companies on the backside of it. Only way we make our money is one is we're highly incentivized to help the sales reps that are going through the process actually close deals because we're giving them their tuition back after they do one deal, right? The second is on the backside of it. I'm incentivized because the only way that we get paid really is from our clients is whenever we have to do the 12-month ongoing coaching program that we do with them, right? So that's going to be the sales rep's going to continue on with the 4 weekly calls that they get, one-on-one help as well. And you're going to get fractional sales management with that. So my sales manager is going to step in, review your KPIs on a bi-weekly basis with you and your rep, and actually listen to calls and kind of give structure. And then we also build in the fractional COO piece with that, which is helping to make sure operationally, are you staying on track with everything that needs to get done so we can help you drive more revenue. So that's really kind of where we're going with Let's Grow COO.
And for the other ones and you on a personal level?
Oh, on a personal level, yeah. So for me personally, I'm on a weight loss journey, so that's going to be a big one. So I think I got too comfortable for a little while, so it's time to start losing some weight, and then also working on my pilot license is the next one for me. So
That's
yeah,
awesome, Matt. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and wisdom with us today. It's been a pleasure having you on Investor One-on-One. If our listeners want to connect with you and learn more about you, what's the best way to find you?
yeah. So if you're new and getting ready in the game, just go to acquisitionreps.com. And from there is an application process you'll have to go through with that. But we don't take any money until you've actually made it through the application process anyway. And then if you want to connect with my fractional COO company, letsgrowcoo.com, just go to that website, book a call directly on there. And then if you want to connect with me personally, I'm on Facebook. Facebook's really the best way to get a hold of me. So just look up Matt Viebrock. I'm one of the only ones in the country with that name. So, and then, yeah, so it's Viebrock.
For sure. And to everyone watching and listening, thanks for tuning in and stay connected for more interviews with the nation's top investors, marketers, and business leaders. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.